Hey guys, Lonnie here. Just wanted to take you through as a first step on a new blog I'm building for my Learn CodeIgniter site. It'll be a blog and a LMS system. I wanted to kind of show behind the scenes how I was thinking about things, how I was structuring. I think that might be of use to a lot of people that are just getting started out with CodeIgniter. Right, so here we've got an example of where I'm at currently. I've got some just dummy data seeded in there. And so let's take a look real quick. It doesn't do a whole lot. But maybe more than you might expect at this point. I've only been working on it like 2 days now. So we're at that, okay? So it'll display all your posts here in a nice paginated form. Click load more. It swaps it out in place thanks to the magic of HTMX. There's very little to do there. Just works as you would expect. Nice, quick, seamless, right? So if we go back to the top here, I'm using Common Mark, which is a markdown converter for GitHub flavored markdown for the blog posts. And one of the things you'll see is that it can do a lot of stuff. And I'm not 100% sure I'm going to use all this. I may have to go to JavaScript embedder, but this will take about 3 seconds to load this one because I do not have the cache implemented yet or turned on at the moment, just using the dummy filter. But the Common Mark filter can do things like automatically embed videos based on the link. Currently, I've got it set to be able to do embeds from YouTube, Vimeo, Twitter, and GitHub gists. So it'll do all that automatically. I was just doing some tests on the markdown stuff here on this one particular post. Got syntax highlighting working, although it doesn't seem to work when I do a caching. I've still got to figure that out. So very simple blog post, right? Now, because this is going to be part of a membership site, right now with Patreon, it may evolve past that. You can have things that are members only posts, right? This would be like, say you're on my Patreon already. I've got some free posts and some that are restricted to members only. This is the same exact thing. So if it's members only, it'll tell you right here, pop up, and it'll show you a little login thing. And if you noticed, that page loaded without any apparent page load. Again, thanks to HTMX and boosting. The way it works is it grabs the entire page. So like, if I click this, it'll grab the entire blog page, return the HTML for the entire thing, and then it'll swap it out behind the scenes. So it does an AJAX request. Swap it out, and it's faster than re-rendering the whole thing. As you can see, it's seamless. It looks like I'm using some kind of JavaScript front end there. Not really. HTMX is JavaScript, but I'll show you here in a little bit how easy it is to do this. I'm really becoming a big fan of using HTMX. And so if I go back here to the main thing, you'll see again, no apparent page load, posts just load in. Very nice, very slick, no work at all. So that's where I'm currently at. So fun little things like how many minutes it estimated for the average English-speaking male or adult to read the post. And then it'll actually tell you if it has a video embedded in it. Basically, that's where we're at. All right. So let's take a look at how I'm doing this. All right. Hopefully you can see this fine. Yeah, it does work. Okay. So I'm using Bonfire, as you might expect. And for Bonfire, uses modules to be able to do all the backend stuff, to be able to integrate with the search and some of the automagic stuff that it does, right? So I've got my blog module here, which handles everything in basically 2 files, the model and the controller. I do have an entity here. Let's take a look at the model first. Well, I take it back. So now we know this is where all the code for the blog is being stored, is in this module here, which I did set up a namespace for it so that it has just a nice, clean, simple namespace there that I can use. And if you're wondering how to do that, you go to your autoload file, you just say, hey, I want it to be blog, and tell it the location of where that's at. So there's that. And then Bonfire also provides a theming system. It comes out of the box with an app, an admin, and an auth theme. I have not touched the auth theme yet. I've been focusing primarily on the app. You'll see I'm using Sass here with Prism for code highlighting. And also, to combine all this, I'm also using Tailwind CSS, which I've become a huge fan of. I think it can get abused and become really messy if you're not careful. But you can do some great stuff with it. if we take a look at the package.json file, you'll see, where are we at? There we go. You'll see that it has, I'm loading up Parcel. And what Parcel is much like Webpack or Gulp or something where it handles transpiling. It handles combining files. It handles minification, pretty much everything behind the scenes automatically for you. You don't have to tell it hardly anything. And in my experience so far, it has worked great. It's the simplest way I found to deal with JavaScript with the front end aspect of it. And so what you do is you just have a script down here that you run, tells it to start, and that will run Parcel, and it will look at my app, my main CSS file there, and my main JavaScript file, and it will automatically, locate what it needs to do to those files, take care of it, and put it in my public folder. And if you look up here, it actually puts it in the correct CSS or JavaScript file along with a map. Works fantastic. So in my CSS file, I'm importing my Tailwind components, importing my 2 fonts that we're using, and then I have a bunch of common styles. And this is one thing I don't see enough, at least at my company, where people will actually do common styles here and not do it everywhere in your code with Tailwind. Tailwind is a utility first, not a utility only framework. So I find this works really well to do very common styles or stuff that we don't want to just get messy with on the front end. And then JavaScript at the moment is just simply pulling in HTMX so that that's taken care of. Well, I'm sure there will be more at the end. For those not familiar with HTMX, HTMX provides a set of utilities for easily, here, let's pull up so I can, well, as I'm pulling this up, I'll show you here in just a second. But what it does is it provides some new commands that you can add to your HTML. In this case, boosting. And what boosting is where it loads it behind the scenes, like I was telling you before, right? So HTMX is a great thing to look at. You can do GET requests, post, you can do any of your requests with it, tell it when to trigger, where to put it, stuff like that. Works very nice. And super simple like that. We'll look at some more later. But all of my files that show what something is supposed to look like are here. So like a post, my paywall notice, all this kind of stuff is in the theme. That's where I keep it, because if I want to change themes out, I want it all in one place. So let's go look at our controller. So for the index file, which just shows this latest post page, for the index file, we've got very simple. We pull up our model, and the only reason I'm grabbing it as a separate instance here is because we also need to pull the pager out. And then thanks to a library that one of our team members did, he's got an HTMX library that adds some additional features to the request object, which I think is awesome. We can tell if it's an HTMX request, if it's been boosted or not. And so what, I'll come back to this, but simply all it does on the first request is it loads up our posts, and we'll look at that method in a moment. It loads up the posts, sends them to the view along with a pager. Now on the second request, so that will display this right here. Now if we hit load more, what happens there is it comes in, it is an HTMX request at that point, and it's not boosted, so we know that all we need is a fragment. Michael's library also has the concept of fragments, which we will look at. Let's go ahead and look at them now. And what a fragment does is it says, hey, this chunk of code, so fragment to end fragment, this chunk of code right here, I can pull that out and return that by itself. I don't need to make another view for it. Give it a try. I'm kind of enjoying it, but at the same point, I could have easily made this another view and just use that separately. We'll see what the overhead's like, and I may go back to that. But for now, I'm trying it out. And so if we go back to that file, it takes that and it just renders a fragment that we labeled by posts. Other than that, it's the same thing. That view with the post and the pager, and that's how it knows to return just that HTML and not the full page. All right. So now all the magic here really happens in the post models list function here. Well, I need to comment my code a little better here, but it takes the number per page and that's it. So what we do here is we grab everything from a post And then I want to use the full name of a user and be able to display that. I'm not doing that currently. I was doing it originally on the post. I may come back to it. We'll see if I need that. And then it uses a couple shorthand methods I've done where I only want published things. I want to include the user, order it by publish at, and return the paginated version of it. Okay. This is one thing I like to do just to make my models a little more readable, is provide little helper or scope functions, you might call them, that set certain states or help include certain things. Like this, in this case, publish means I only want published posts, right? So it checks to make sure it's published and that we are past the correct date for it to be published. And then with author, just simply does a join. And well, yeah, I could have done this join in the call itself, but it's not the only place I'm going to need that join. And I think just being able to say with author makes it nice and clean. I still have to pull in the parts I want from the author or from the user file and not get the full entity. If we needed the full entity, we would have to do something else, which actually we'll look at here in a second. And so it's a real simple, real clean reading way to handle this. If we need a search, you can do the same thing. You can do a search that handles it all here, and in your controller, you're just saying, hey, search it, give it the stuff from the request. It gets back the pages it needs, and you're done. It's a great way to keep things nice and clean. Now, the post model does return a post entity, which we can look at here. I guess I don't need this sidebar, do I? Okay. And the post entity provides a few additional features, like it returns the link to it. That way, if I ever need to change how I link in the site, it's all just in one place. In this case, I have two features to be able to render the body out. And it renders it out or renders the summary out. And it uses, like I said, the markdown. And all it does is grabs that service, which I made, I'll show you in a second, and then converts the body into HTML. If it's not including or in doing any embeds, it's very, very fast, and I have zero problems with the speed of it. With embeds, there's an issue with it, and so I end up having to do some caching with it. With a summary, there's a summary field on the blog post. So it takes that, and if that's empty, because while I'm going to require for any new posts, stuff that I import from old stuff may not have a summary, it'll take the first 100 words is what I've got pulling elsewhere, but I had originally done 50 words here, and use that as a summary, and then convert it. So let's look at our services file. So the first thing, the primary thing I did here, I overrode the view, just add the fragment stuff because Michael's stuff didn't work with my theme system, the modifier I had, so I had to do some of that. So we'll ignore that. That's not really necessary for now. But a markdown. So I created a markdown service. And this just makes it so that it takes care of all of the configuration of the markdown object and returns that. So I don't have to think about it. It caches it just like you would with service. So there's only one instance and not wasted memory, right? In this case, we are taking the embed library that handles the automatic embedding of the objects, figuring out the stuff we want from that. Obviously, I don't have my Twitter token in there yet, and that will pull from the environment file anyway. And then our configuration file, any HTML input in the stuff is going to get stripped out. Just to be safe, we do not allow unsafe links in converting it, just trying to make sure that any blog posts stay as safe and secure as possible. And then we do our embedding setup here, which says we can do it from YouTube, Vimeo, Twitter, or GitHub are the 4 sources it will recognize. If it doesn't find those, it'll just automatically display a link. Set up our GitHub flavored markdown and our embed extension, create a new converter, and it's out. But the point I want to make here is that when you have a class that has lots of configuration, doing something like this, putting in a service, is probably the best way to do that because it sets it all in one spot and you get a singleton back. So if we go back to here, so the post itself, it can render the body, it can display a link, it can render a summary, it can calculate the reading time based on the word length and tell whether there's a video in there. I'm just kind of looking at the links or see if the links show up in there to determine if it has a video exiting that string. And then it determines whether it should have a paywall shown. This will probably have a better permissions check at the end. Right now, I've just got a permissions field that says what permissions are required to view it. And I'm just checking to see if there's no permissions set. Obviously, you don't need a paywall. If they are set, though, and you're not a member, it shows the paywall. Otherwise, It's not, otherwise you are logged in, you are in the right group and theoretically have the right permissions. So that's the kind of stuff I like to use on entities themselves, or logic that applies to that. Especially stuff like doing a link, common aspects like that. And so once we get our posts, let's go back to our index file. It comes down, shows obviously our basic stuff here. We are extending. These are view layouts if you're not familiar with them. And one of the features it allows you to do is just to extend a template. All right, in this case, it's a master template. We'll look at that. So the master template, it's got the head stuff here. View meta, this is something that Bonfire provides, which is just a simple class that, or simple service that allows you to specify meta information, title, description, any other your meta tags that you need to display on a page. Very handy. In this case, we're using it for, well, the title gets used a lot. And currently, other than that, it uses, if we go back to our post controller, we're using it to set the description meta tag based on our post summary. But it just sets the description that way for search engine recognition. You're all good. And then we have sections split out. The render section, what that does with the view link, or with the, sorry, I was looking at the asset link here. What that does with the view layouts is that reserves a section. So this says, as part of the view layout features that CodeIgniter ships with, it says, I'm going to create a spot that you can add stuff into from any other view file, and it will always show up here. And this reserves a spot for it, and that's where it'll render that content out if you've added any. If not, it just ends up empty. And then asset link is something that Bonfire provides just to be able to find assets from within themes and other parts that are not just in your public folder. And it does some cache busting stuff as well. If you want to know more about that, head on over to Bonfire's GitHub and take a look at that. But we use sections a lot. If you have any extra stuff that we want to add to the header, we've got that. We've got a separate one for styles. Alerts, Gatner on the team has created an alerts package, which I really like, that makes displaying toast messages or just confirmation flash messages and being able to style them and everything really easy. So I use that in Bonfire, so I've got that here. Include, well, that's part of Bonfire's theme system. It's just a view. It's just a view call. So like if you're doing this not using Bonfire's theming system, this would just be echo out view, whatever view you're doing. But in this case, what it does, it looks in the current theme to find it first. And so I'm pulling that from the theme, the top navigation, and here's our hold another section for header cover, which isn't being used yet. So then we put up our main structure on the page and render out another section, which is our content, right? So then you've got your footer, pull in any related JavaScript that you need. Very simple, making use of view layouts. Love the feature, use it all the time. I actually don't do anything without view layouts at the moment. If you're not familiar with them, definitely look them up. Those view cells, I'm not using yet. I will though. We'll cover that in a different video. But view cells, view layouts, my two favorite things with the view system in CodeIgniter. So that's really it. This is just our master template, right? It gets everything so that all of this stuff is handled on every page just by saying extend master. All right. And so here what we're saying is, remember the render section where we had main? This is how we specify that we want content to go in there. So around the content that we want to show in the render section area, we use a section and an end section call. You have to give it a name so it knows which section to get rendered into. You don't on the end section because it'll just do the last one. Then there, everything's really fairly easy here. If we don't have any posts, we tell them that I need to make a better message. Haven't done that yet. And like I said, this is the fragment stuff that is not 100% necessary, but it's what I'm currently experimenting with for returning just partial HTML. And then if we're not empty, oh, I've got a double call there. I can probably clean that out now. Anyway, and then we just loop over each of the posts, setting the post, and in this case, summarize as a variable that I'm using just to tell it to use a summary instead of a full display of a post, and include the post file itself. So It's what renders an individual post. And then our button down here. Now, if we take a look at this, this is where the HTMX comes in handy again. So in this case, I'm using a link. And you could do this on a div, you could do this on whatever, but because my styling is all attached to anchors, I am using anchor tag here, but I'm not giving it an href. Instead, I'm telling HTMX that, hey, when you're clicked, that's the default. When you're clicked, do a GET request to, and we're taking our pager and we're grabbing the next URI, or the URI for the next page from the pager as the URL to grab. So that's telling it, hey, do a GET request. And when you get that information back, because it'll do an AJAX request, get the data back. When you get the HTML back, our target is the new posts div, which in this case just wraps around this button. Because we want that information to be added at the end of our list of items here. So the new post tag is just, where are we? Just right here. So that when that gets replaced, all of our data will get added onto the end there. Okay, and we're telling it in this case, normally by default, it would put it inside that div. And so you would still have the new post div, and then next time it rendered back, you'd have another new post div, and it gets messy and confusing and doesn't work right. So in this case, I'm telling it, hey, I don't want to do inner HTML. I want to swap out the outer HTML. So it replaces the new post completely. And then when the fragment is loaded in from here, it will have, well, in this case, I've already loaded it, but it would have another new post area with our button here. So that's the kind of stuff that HTMX makes doing very easy. But they've also got things for handling stuff with server-side events, webhooks, all kinds of different functionality. You can get filters on how you click things and everything. But its basis at its core is being able to easily swap out and manipulate content without having to do anything. Because if we're doing this, let's say it was 5 years ago, we were doing it with jQuery. We would do a jQuery.load, right? But we'd have to write the event, attach it to it, and all that kind of stuff. Here, we're just on the entity itself. We're saying, hey, here's the rules and how to do that. Nice and simple. But it's like the old days where you're using jQuery load, and it works nice and simple. Beautiful. So a huge fan of HTMX so far. Instead of using a big front-end framework, it makes things so easy. And I wouldn't even have to use Partial, except I'm wanting to use Tailwind, which the thing I love about Tailwind, besides all the utility classes, which make it so easy and so wonderful to do basic styling, and also to do especially the responsive stuff. The way that Tailwind handles the responsive classes is better than any other one that I've come across in the past. I was really hesitant and resistant, honestly, against Tailwind at the beginning, but I've come to love it. I know when I first heard that it had a compiler, I'm like, why the heck does a CSS framework need a compiler, you know? But it's awesome because what it'll do is it'll analyze, you tell it where to find your files. It'll analyze your files and only include the tags or the CSS that is actually used within your project. So like, let's say you would be using Bootstrap and you'd pull in all of Bootstrap, whether through an external link or you're just doing it a quick and dirty way by loading it in and using Webpack or something. You've got everything within Bootstrap, right? You don't need 80% of that a lot of times. It just doesn't get used, and so it's wasted bandwidth, it's wasted space. The cool thing that Tailwind does is it, like I said, it checks all your files for what's actually being used and only generates that CSS. So you never have to worry about having extra code that you don't need. That's one of the things I absolutely love about it too. And so that's the only reason I'm having to use Partial and actually process stuff in the back end. Otherwise, I could probably do it all without that and just handle HTMX. And if I needed more interaction, I'd probably use Alpine, honestly, to handle interactive stuff on the page itself. And depending on, I'm sure once I get into the LMS, I'll probably have to start using some Alpine. But as far as just the blog, not really necessary. Trying to think if there's anything else here. I think this covers most of what we've got now. And I hope this is useful to you. Please let me know. And if this format provides any value, I'm just kind of getting a peek behind the scenes. Do I need to go in more detail on these type of vlogs? Do I need to split them out into smaller chunks as I go forward? What would help you understand? Or is just getting kind of a broad overview like this helpful? Again, Bonfire uses a modules concept. If I wasn't using Bonfire, I would just be using straight controllers. I added this core director here. That's just for my overridden view class for the view fragment, so we can probably ignore that. Other than that, entities, got my overall user entity here, which honestly it is just overriding Bonfire's user at the moment. But I've got it here so that in case I need to add features to it, which I'm sure I will want to, I'll want to be able to add at least shorthand features like, checking, say, is member instead of checking in group member. Little things like that to make it read nicer, right? Oh, did we look at listing, at the list function in the model? Let's go back to the model real quick. Yeah, we did. Okay. I don't like to let the models get too fat, but I think the business logic has to go somewhere. So you've got a couple options here, right? One thing you could do with all your business logic is you could keep it here, but that gets really nasty and you don't necessarily need all of that information here. Use that just for controlling. So then that leaves you a couple other options. The only two options I really see, you can use your model as a business logic thing. And that's what I do most of the time. However, if the model starts to get too big and doing too much, then you can use another class or trait. And so you can either compose or use composition to bring your other class in, or use a trait to bring the extra functionality in, just to make the file a little smaller and break the logic up. I don't have to do that too often, but when stuff gets really big in the model, I like to break it up just so it's easier to reason about. But yeah, other than that, everything would have been up here. The views I've got that I do have, thanks to Bonfire, I've got my overall index method. This is what's actually showing this page. Like I started to show this to you earlier, but overrides master main. None of the styling is here, if you notice. Almost all of the styling is handled in files. Well, in the stuff that's in the theme. So you've got the master file, which handles the overall look, and then you've got the post itself, the paywall notice, author info. All of that stuff is in the theme itself. So that's why I'm using these includes. Other than that, the only thing in my blog module is to show the overall structure, not the look. Hope that makes sense. And I'm trying to think, is there anything else? Oh, there's a couple little things here. So if we go to the post file, and if we look at this, there we go. Bonfire provides a nice little helper called AppDate, which just simply allows you to set a format that you want all of your dates to be shown at across the application. You can change that back within the settings of Bonfire. And we'll look at that some other time. Bonfire is working right now. Like I said, I haven't styled it or anything. But if I were to come way back up the top here, because the way I've got this set, I've got full screen and you can't actually see it. So we'll worry about that later. Okay, like I said, if this has been helpful, please let me know. Let me know if this format works for you, if there's anything else you'd like. But I thought doing a vlog kind of behind the scenes as I build this out to show you how I'm structuring things I'm doing, things I'm using, what I'm finding works well, what I'm finding problematic, that kind of stuff. I thought that would be fun and helpful for you guys. Please let me know, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye.